hope you all are well this evening. My name is Joseph Canty. I'll be serving as our moderator this evening. We'll be talking about a number of issues that are impacting our communities. I'd like to just kind of share just sort of logistics of the program this evening so you're aware of what's going on. But before we do that, I'd like to actually introduce our guests. I would love to have each one of them speak. So first up, we have Dr. Justin Hopkins. So Doc, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Hopkins. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm originally from Queens, New York. I went to school at Hampton University, HBCU, and did my doctoral training at Regent University in Virginia Beach. And essentially the kind of work that I do involves therapy, psychotherapy, talk therapy, getting to the bottom of life's mysteries and issues, the things that are confusing and confounding and challenging and problematic in our lives, figuring out how to understand them and being able to help people to learn about themselves better. I do individual therapy, couples therapy, and family therapy as well in my private practice in Washington, DC. And Joe, I'll just check with you to make sure I haven't left out anything.
No, you're all good. Thank you.
Good, good, good. Happy to be here.
Next up, thank you for being here. Next up, we're going to have Mr. Albert Smith, Jr.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Albert Smith. I'm an organizational learning and development practitioner, a global diversity and inclusion strategist, a movement intellectual, and founder and chief strategist at InMass Consulting. InMass is a boutique consulting firm that specializes in strategic inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, and social justice transformation in the for-profit, nonprofit, and government sector. My academic training is in the fields of Black cultural studies, queer studies, religious studies, ethics, and critical race studies. On a lighter note, I consider myself to be a road warrior, an art collector, a style aficionado, a master storyteller, and by some accounts, an angelic troublemaker who has a knack for words and a mastery for understanding what big, audacious ideas will help organizations win the future. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to a very spirited conversation.
Thank you so much. Next up, we'll have Attorney Ken Alce. Attorney Ken.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Joe, for the introduction. I am very glad to be here. I am a corporate lawyer. I practice here in the Baltimore area. I'm originally from Miami, Florida. And my origins are I'm a Haitian descendant and was born in Montreal. I practice my practices in the M&A space, mergers and acquisitions, corporate and securities, which is stocks and bonds, so on and so forth. I practice primarily in the banking space and in the energy industry. I'm thrilled to be here to bring whatever perspective I can bring and send it right back to you, Joe.
Mr. Alce, we appreciate your support and being here. Looking forward to your contribution this evening. Next up, we'll have Dr. Kenneth D. Waters.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kenneth Waters. I focus, my work is in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what does that mean is that basically I work in academic environments, working with nonprofits and so forth, helping them identify how their bias and biases can impact and impede student growth. One of the things that I do now in my current job is that, as well as helping with some of the hiring procedures of ensuring that hiring is done equitable, and then that we're getting qualified candidates in from different backgrounds. So that's kind of like me in a nutshell. I'm originally from Philly. I've been out in the DMV area for about 3 years. I guess it'll be 3 years. It's 3 years this week. Thanks for the invite, Joe. Looking forward to thoughtful dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Waters. We appreciate you being here this evening. Next up, we're going to have Attorney Will Jolley.
Hey, good evening. I'm originally from Northwest Washington, D.C., also known as Uptown. And I went to William & Mary for undergrad and then Howard for law school. And now I work for D.C. government as a lawyer, and specifically we're called attorney advisors. And I work in labor relations and collective bargaining. And a love of mine is entertainment law.
Thank you, Mr. Jolley. And you all, my name is Joseph Canty. I am a diversity practitioner, but also someone who is, I would consider myself a storyteller and troublemaker, as Mr. Smith also spoke of. But in all seriousness, I'm someone who's committed to community engagement, development, passionate about working with nonprofits and helping to develop young men of all backgrounds, but in particular an affinity for helping young men that look like me and making sure that they're developing the proper leadership skills to sustain a productive life going forward beyond secondary education. So excited to be here with you all, excited to have this wonderful group of panelists, and we're going to get started. Before we get started, though, I'd love to just share some important pieces of what's going to happen today, as I started to earlier. As we kind of think about this conversation, I would just love to know, just through the chat, there's a chat area on this, there's a chat feature on the actual webinar. I love to see if you are in a great mood, just checking in, type yes. If you're not in a great mood, feel free to type no. And if you're just present and you are maintaining, it's okay to just type I'm present. Would love to see your responses. And later on, there will be something in store for you all as a little prize, because we do appreciate your support and engagement this evening. Moving ahead, just what's going to happen beyond this webinar tonight. So there will be a series of these webinars that we hope to do. So believe me, your support is much appreciated. We're excited to have you, and we're going to be talking about the impact of so many issues on the Black community, COVID-19, racism, equity, education, and of course access, and that includes to healthcare and a myriad of things that in terms of resources. Attendees can expect to have an in-depth discussion on staying resilient, overcoming trauma and health inequities during and after COVID-19. We'll also be sharing some strategies for equal access to education, job opportunities, structural racism, and creating opportunities in the Black community, along with a Q&A session towards the end of this program. Some of the things that we'll cover today, I just mentioned to you. What I'd love to talk to you really quickly about is just maintaining a safe space for everyone here in the conversation. I want you all to know that this is being recorded. That is why we do not have your faces available, but you can certainly chime in and add questions to the chat space, and I'll get into that in a moment. But before we do that, I want to set some discussion norms for our conversation this evening. Should you feel free to share or comment, we are fine with that. We ask that everybody maintain a level of respect for one another. And in order to do that, we think it's important for you to be open to listening to others first. Wait for an opportunity to speak. Once we get into the Q&A, we will, if you raise your hand, we will allow you to come in, and certainly you can speak, or you can, through the Q&A function, on the actual webinar. And then please just be respectful again, and be open to others' perspectives and experiences. And when you speak, share from your personal experiences. That's very important. Share the space. If you ask 2 or 3 questions and we miss it, please be patient with us and understand that there could be a number of questions coming in. If we don't get to you, we do apologize. We will do our best to respond. And just be thoughtful and not criticize others, including the panelists and others, when you put comments in the chat space. Thank you. So the other thing that I want to share with you all that's important before we get into the prompts, and I think it's important to share, is that we really want your participation this entire time. And in order to do that, when questions are posed, if you have comments during the actual discussion, we're going to ask that you wait until that discussion is done, and we will respond to it during the Q&A. And then there will be some resources that we will share towards the end of the program. And if you did register, the video will be available for those who registered to attend. And then I will also share a number of resources with you post this webinar this evening. Thank you. So we're going to move on. Panelists, are we ready to begin this conversation? All right.
Sure.
So, all right. Let's move on. All right, so I'm going to ask, and I think it's just important to share this so we get going here. And let's see. Sorry, you all. Our first question up for the panelists, and this is for the entire group. When you all begin to think about just everything that's happening right now in society and some of the topics that I mentioned, what are some of the thoughts, issues, or concerns that come to mind when you think of COVID-19, racism, access, education, and equity? I'd like to start with Dr. Hopkins.
Yeah, sure. Just checking to make sure it wasn't muted. Well,
you're fine.
From a mental health standpoint, and thinking as a psychologist, as I always do, it's an incredibly stressful time for so many people, right? Outbreaks are stressful. They're anxiety provoking. There are very real threats in our society right now when it comes to our health. We're worried about our own health and mortality. We're worried about the health and mortality of our parents, our friends, our community members, other people in our lives. And so it's a really concerning time. And in particular, right, there's lots of uncertainty. There's so many things that very much feel out of our control, and we're not really sure what's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to be another month, another 2 months, another 3 months. We're not sure exactly when this is going to wrap up, right? For most of us, we can kind of wrap our heads around dealing with the situation when we know what it's going to take to endure it, to manage it, to address it, how long we're going to need those resources in order to address it. And right now, right, we're not sure. So there's a lot of things that are beyond our knowing right now, and that we're not quite sure how long it's going to take for us to deal with it. So, right, one definition of stress is when we're faced with a situation and we're not sure we're going to have enough resources to deal with it, right? If you have to pay for something, you're not sure if you have enough money. You need to complete an assignment, you're not sure if you have enough time, right? That's stress, right? The same very much applies here. And so people are feeling really stressed with the circumstances that we face. And I think the other thing is that there's a lot of folks that are losing hope, right? There's quite a bit of despair. It's a dark time. It is challenging. There's some people that are wondering if they're going to be able to pay their bills right now, if they will have a job tomorrow, right? And so there are just some urgent situations in terms of our own survival and resilience that are pretty challenging. And I'm seeing a rise in that with people that I work with and just in our general public, and it's challenging. So those are the two things that really come to mind for me.
Thank you for sharing. Attorney Alce, would love to hear from you on that question.
So when I think back to wealth creation in this nation, and I'm talking about generational wealth, I think back to certain monumentous moments in our nation's history where people took advantage of certain situations. Some granted on their own bootstraps, if you will, but others as boosted by the government. So right now we are experiencing, as Dr. Hopkins said, just an unprecedented time which can cause so much stress and pressure on people. But if you flip it, this time could also be considered an opportunity. So there are two ways to look at that, right? On one hand, this is an opportunity to take advantage, what we call arbitrage. There's a lot of scared money out there right now. And if you have some type of talent, skill, so on and so forth, there are a lot of people that want to invest in you. We see the market going up and down, just money doesn't know where to go. So if you don't have a hustle or a drive or an LLC right now during COVID quarantine, that's perfectly fine. But if you do, now is a great time to strike while the iron's hot. However, on the flip side of that, we look at right now, I think the statistic came out that 90+% of the people who haven't been able to tap into the PPP loan and the payroll loans that the government has been providing have been minorities, which is distressing, which is essentially what we see as a legacy of this country, where there's a ton of money to be given out. Oftentimes it doesn't come to us. So if you are eligible, I would say fight right now to try to make sure that you can get in where you fit in. There are a lot of different avenues. We know obviously of the government, but I've heard also of Magic Johnson doing $100 million loan to small minority-owned businesses. So if there is time, I would recommend and encourage that we take this opportunity, which is a tragedy, almost 90,000+% dead. But if you can, now is a great time to, again, strike while the iron's hot.
Thank you for sharing that. Next up, we'll have Attorney Jolley. Love to hear from you on this question.
I would say an important piece is health and safety. As I think about our families, our people, you don't have anything if you don't have your health, and you don't have anything if you don't have your safety. So just right now, that being an important place for us to concentrate on and make sure that we're looking out for ourselves and for others as best as possible.
Thank you for sharing that. Mr. Smith,
well, I'll
love to hear from you on this.
You know, I'm going to go for the jugular here, right? And say what comes to mind.
All right, let's do it.
Is how utterly and profoundly silent this country in particular has been to the plight of subaltern groups, Black people, poor folk, disabled folk, elders, immigrants in this country, the folks that are always and already on the margin, who so desperately seek equal opportunity in this moment. I think of how America has abdicated its truth or abdicated the truth, and how Black folks have historically nurtured stories that testify to our life experiences and realities. However, it is white supremacy that teaches white-skinned folk and black-skinned folk alike, some black-skinned folk alike, right? That Black suffering is either illusory or is the consequence of our own. What I've learned in this moment of COVID-19 is that there is simply nothing new under the sun. And what America has awakened to in light of this pandemic is similar to what Dr. Cornel West recalled during the early days of 9/11. And that is the ugly niggerization in America.
There's a lot to unpack there. I appreciate just your candor in that. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Hopkins, we're going to move back to you on this topic. And Doc, what I'd love to ask you is, you know, based on your experience and where you are, what ways have you looked to address some of the issues that you spoke about in this conversation as we start down this panel with this panel? What I'd love to know is just some of the ways you're working and maybe how people in your industry are addressing the issues you brought up.
Yeah, and I'm going to tie in some things that Mr. Jolley and Mr. Smith have mentioned as well, right, on this issue of like health and safety. One, I just want to say, like, there really is no much material difference between mental health and physical health, right? When we are stressed, it activates our immune system, which turns on inflammation, which leads to chronic illness, which makes us more susceptible to illnesses and viruses like influenza and, yes, of course, coronavirus, right? So literally managing our stress is so very key right now. And when you are one of those members that is on the fringe group, right, we already carry, when you're already a member of those marginalized groups, right, you already carry an extra burden of stress on your back, in your skin, in your very stimulus value, right? Like our experiences very much are funneled through that because of how America treats us, how America dehumanizes us, how it doesn't honor our safety and our well-being, and so we have to. So this idea of self-care that we're talking about so much in many ways is a radical idea, because for people of color in particular, and especially Black folk, because what it says is that I value myself enough to care about myself and to actually carve out time in my life to cater to me, to take care of me, to manage my health and wellness and safety, right? And that is antithetical to American ideology at its core. It's completely antithetical. So in terms of dealing with the current moment and everything being out of our control, right, stress management is going to be incredibly important, right? And so a couple things I'll say about this is, one, if you don't have a self-care regimen, you need one. If you have one, you're going to have to beef it up. Our external reality impacts our internal reality, no matter how robust and resilient and we have always been and perseverant we have always been. We have to acknowledge there are going to be times that we've got to step up the things that we need to do in order to take care of ourselves, because there are more things that we're dealing with. We're not just working from home under luxury. We're not allowed to go outside because there's a global pandemic going on, and that adds stress. Right. Right. So we have to acknowledge that, and also acknowledge that we need to do more in order to address that stress. So that means making sure you're going for walks, making sure you're managing how many stressful things you're intaking, turning off the news when you need to. Right. And also making sure you're eating well and discovering potentially new things that interest you. And the only other thing I'll say right now, so I'll defer more to my panelist members. I don't want to monopolize the time. Is that I'll just say that it's okay to not be okay in this moment. I want to give everyone, I really, really want to give everyone permission to feel how they feel, because it's only that we acknowledge what it is that we experience that we're able to address it, right? What we don't acknowledge persists and reoccurs. Right. And oftentimes, because we're so busy being strong, because we always have to be, we don't allow ourselves to acknowledge the challenge in its entirety, right? How hard it can be. So I would say it's okay to not be okay, and name what it is that you feel, because when you name what it is that you feel, you can better address it. If you're feeling hopeless, name that you feel hopeless. If you're feeling overwhelmed, name that you feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel that. And in feeling that, you'll get the information that you need in order to address it and be able to manage it more. So I want to encourage everyone to beef up whatever it is that you're doing regarding stress management and self-care, knowing that to do so is a radical idea, especially as a person of color, and to feel how you feel. Name it so that you can process it, experience it, and work with it rather than deny it or work against it.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Dr. Waters, I want to move in and I want to ask you just a question, just to kind of piggyback on what's been shared. Based on your thoughts that you shared and issues impacting the Black community and education in the United States, what opportunities do you see to support young Black men as an educator?
Well, one of the things, I mean, just to give a little context, I am in a predominantly white institution, the academic environment I'm in. However, we have a diverse student body. You could call it from an athlete, from the everyday smart guy, intellectual, whomever. But we have a pretty diverse student body. One of the challenges is we do not have a diverse faculty, and that's where I come in at. And one of the things I've been charged with, or just for my own personal own personal reasons, own personal passion is ensure our Black boys are able to thrive academically, socially, professionally, and so forth. So one of the things that comes to my mind and try to relate back to the question that was initially posed was what Eric B. Rakim said in his song Casualties of War. And that what resonates with me because our Black boys right now, they were already marginalized. They already had things that were projected onto them just because of their skin color. But now we're going into their homes. Now we're going into their existence. We're experiencing their culture a little more in detail and depth than what was initially done. Our teachers, I just did a professional development on this for our teachers the other day, of recognizing how their bias and biases now can impact their experience with that young Black boy, but also impact that Black boy's ability to thrive in this particular environment, right? So what I'm trying to help them understand is that from a cultural standpoint, you have to be more intentional about what does it mean to not only educate a Black boy, but what does it mean to understand who he is, what he is, and what does it stand for? And one of the beauties that I find in my position now is that when I first started there 3 years ago, everyone was this great teacher, educator, et cetera, and all the above, but no one could connect with this particular population. And it got to the point where like, hey, are you realizing what you're doing and how that can be perceived? Well, what do you mean? I'm perceiving it in the most genuine, organic manner. I said, no, but from a cultural standpoint, again, I focus more on the culture. You're actually disrespecting this particular child, hence why you having a hard time connecting with this young man. And to the point now, I call it a blessing in disguise. Whenever there's a meeting that has to deal with some type of social behavior or some type of academic behavior, yes, I'm the advocate, but in these meetings with the administrators, with the deans and so forth, I'm the liaison. I'm the one that's coming up with strategies of how do we mitigate these microaggressions that's really impacting and impeding the growth and advancement of our young Black boys.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, I want to jump in on that and just piggyback on this and move back to Dr. Hopkins really fast. And as we talk about microaggressions and all of the things that are happening, Dr. Hopkins, I'd love to ask you, just in thinking about that, and a lot has been shared so far already in this conversation, and I can only imagine the mental and emotional impact on all people of color. But in this instance, Black men that we're discussing, what are some of the trends you are seeing among Black men, young and old, as a result of COVID-19? I just love to hear what you have to say, and I'm sure our guests would as well.
Yeah, I'm certainly seeing for a lot of our young boys transitioning into a learning environment from home, right? Dealing with a number of distractions and things that are challenging, right? That completely change the environment of their learning plan. And also for a lot of men, and particularly Black men and young Black men, as we're socialized to value ourselves if and only if we're able to provide, produce, control, right? And there's so many things that are, again, that are beyond our control in this particular moment. So it's been challenging to identify the angst and stress that they feel, acknowledge what it's about, why it's challenging for them, and to kind of understand how it also impacts their sense of self-esteem and identity, right? That not being able to be as efficient and effective in school because of the distractions that they deal with at home is impacting on them, to acknowledge that those additional difficulties with learning are real, to acknowledge that there are so many things out of their control, and it doesn't mean that they're of any lesser value or that they're any less of a man or a boy. It's it's been incredibly challenging for them. But one of the things that I'm seeing more and more is that they're starting to discover, right, other things that they can do, other ways to define themselves, other ways to make meaning of this challenging time. And I think for all of us, it's important to be mindful of our meaning-making systems and how we're understanding the things that are beyond our control, because we're all processing it in different ways.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we're all still continually processing. Mr. Alce, I'd love to hear from you, just kind of piggyback on this and your thoughts right now. We are in the conversation.
What's interesting, and I agree with my esteemed panelists, is we talk about microaggressions, right? And to some degree, because I am not out and about as much, a lot of those microaggressions tend to be minimized, right? However, there's macroaggressions out the yin yang. Right now, because we are all interconnected in a very novel way through the internet, social media, we can all share the pain at the same time that we are experiencing when we're watching Ahmaud and his murder, when we're watching Brianna and her murder, and we're watching the legal system kind of fail us, if you will, when you see all of Trump's lackeys being released from prison on one hand, but on the other, we're seeing that, as we know, the prison culture tends to be more, affect us as African American and Black way more than other nationalities and races and ethnicities. And yet, while Michael Flynn and Roger Stone are being granted early releases, we see that the prison population, COVID-19 is exploding, and yet not much is being done. So there's a level of macroaggression in the face of the justice system that we're all, like I said, experiencing simultaneously. And actually, Dr. Waters and Dr. Hopkins, I'd love to hear, and not to have you guys monopolize, but would love to hear your thoughts on that subject in particular.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to come back to that in a moment. I'm going to move into I'd love to ask Mr. Smith, just to kind of piggyback on what was shared. You and Attorney Alce, both in two different industries, what are some ways in which you manage stress levels in particular now as we face the real impact of COVID-19? What are your companies doing to support Black men and women and when situations like Breonna Taylor arise and Ahmaud Arbery occur? I just love to know, because Ken, you just spoke about that, and I'm curious how you all are managing in your spaces, and being as an educator, we deal with this a little differently, or maybe not. So I'd love to share with the audience sort of how you all are approaching those conversations. So we'll start with Ken, and then we'll go over to Mr. Smith.
How I'm dealing with that stress, I like the self-care that Dr. Hopkins talked about. That's major. But I'll even take it a step further and saying community has been such a big way for me to connect. It's almost like being apart has its pluses and minuses, especially for somebody like me with so much family all around the world, Miami, Canada, Haiti, and just being able to connect with family that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to connect with has been has been bringing peace into my life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's important. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, Joe, I wanted to take a moment to untether myself from my organization, right? That identity.
No problem.
My professional identity, my 9-to-5 job, to speak freely about what I have observed through conversations with colleagues of mine who are in the consulting space, and just reflecting on my experiences as a consultant when confronted with situations similar to what we are confronting today. To simply say that, and I want to be a truth teller here, right? Like I want to just tell you the unfeathered reality about what organizations are doing and what they aren't doing. What organizations aren't doing, they aren't doing the hard work, right? They're doing the nice to haves and not the need to have, right? And so when I think about how this becomes a really wonderful opportunity for organizations to really shift the zeitgeist of their culture, to really reimagine new possibilities around their identities. It requires a deep commitment and a wrestling of sort with their storied history. Their storied history being rooted in a capitalist system that once again has always and already seeks to put its boot on the necks of those with whom they serve and those with whom they employ, the majority of them, right? And so when I think about where there are opportunities for organizations or what organizations are doing, they're really doing some of the vanilla stuff right now, right? Trainings and education, right? So you have some organizations that are leveraging this moment to do some bold new things to kind of shape shift their organization towards becoming what they believe they have the potential to be. And those organizations are doing things that are really addressing the structural inequities in their policies and their practices. There's no better time than now to really turn things on its head right now, to critique the very systems that were designed without the majority of us in mind. Now, that's the vanilla stuff. And I want to say that as a practitioner now in the space of diversity and inclusion, a great deal really rests on our shoulders. And my critique of the industrial complex that we now call diversity and inclusion is that those who co-labor with me are often somehow relinquishing their responsibility to do the abolitionist work that is at the heart of diversity and inclusion, and that somehow they have been bought and bossed. And I understand why that is the case, because their livelihoods are connected to these institutions, right? But somehow we have to find a way as practitioners, as truth tellers in these institutions, to challenge the institutions and to demand that they actually live out the values that they espouse in their literature, that they hang on their websites, that they tweet in messages, that they actually embody those values, not just simply espouse them. So I'll tell you once again, to kind of wrap things up nicely, what are organizations doing? The vanilla stuff, the training and education, that's really important. I will say that that's really important. Where there is opportunity for organizations to do things differently is to really use this moment as a catalyzing moment to reflect on their systems, their policies, their processes, those things that have institutionally created barriers for equal opportunity and access for all people, not just a small fraction.
Thank you for sharing that. Wow, a lot to unpack, folks, and I am so just thankful to have these great panelists. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Dr. Hopkins, I want to move back to you and Dr. Waters, and I'd love to just ask you both, and Mr. Jolley, what are different forms of structural racism in your professional spaces? Not necessarily who you're employed with or by, but just in terms of what you see, and then where would you describe seeing equity? I mean, tell us about where you see some of those equity gaps at, for Black men in this country. And if you don't mind providing maybe one example. And folks that are listening in, before we move on, I do see that it's 8:16, and in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you all to be gracious with us and maybe give us another 10 minutes so that we can wrap this up appropriately. I'd love to just get a yes in the chat space just to know that we're okay and we can do this and we have your blessing. We will move ahead as quick as possible because we definitely want to share some final thoughts at the end. So thank you all. Dr. Hopkins, I'll start with you, and then Dr. Waters will go to you, and then Mr. Jolley.
Sure. Well, you know, institutional racism is all around us, right? I think for many of us, there's so many ways where we get really bogged down by it. And what comes to mind for me is not so much from an industry perspective of where I experience racism, although I will quickly note, right, that there is still a serious lack of clinicians of color, right? That it's so incredibly hard to find a Black therapist, a Black psychologist, a Black social worker, and then working with insurance around getting reimbursed or getting those services paid for, it can be incredibly challenging. But I think another way that we see institutional racism take its toll is that I think for many of us, because we've always had to be twice as good to get half as far, because it is real. And Joe, I'm a football fan, right? We know that Black quarterbacks are benched twice as fast as other quarterbacks, regardless of stats. Teams lose, right? The next quarterback come up, they'll still lose, but they bench that Black quarterback quicker, right? It affects dollars and cents. The team will lose, right? It affects so many things, but still that Black quarterback is on a shorter leash, right? That happens not just in football, it happens everywhere, right? So we know we have to be twice as good to get half as far. That's additional pressure. And we've often, just taken that on, right? It's our status quo to endure oppression. And I think the ways in which we then deal with it is that we see it as such a sacred virtue to be quiet about our struggle. And to that, I want to say, because it's normal, it is our normal. You have to endure, you have to persevere. And we do, and we will. And along the way, let's also make sure that we're naming that we shouldn't have to deal with this crap, right? And so I would say that it's important to speak the truth along the journey of being twice as good. It's important to speak the truth along the journey of growing and healing, because that's part of how we address the institutional racism, is by constantly acknowledging that we shouldn't have to in the first place.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Waters?
So there are layers to this whole institutional racism. And from a system standpoint, from an operations standpoint, from a policy, curriculum, et cetera, and so forth. And one of the things that I believe Dr. Hopkins was just talking about, and one of the things I agree with as well, is that we got to call it what it is, as opposed to just shooting around the elephant in the room. Just call it what it is, right? And in the spaces that I'm in, it's those microaggressions, it's that passive aggressiveness. And I don't want to say we're used to it, but because that could be used as an excuse, as in a way for why we just continue to push. But I believe now we need to get to the point we need to get to the point where we can actually call it and be confident and not be worrying about if we're going to lose our job. Because the moment we continue just to take it for what it is, okay, now I'm employed. No, you are the asset. And that's where we have to start getting into that perspective. We need to know our worth, because we add a certain, not only a check box, but within that check box that we're adding to these predominantly white institutions, these predominantly white environments, we also need to add and push in what we bring to the table. And as opposed to just being happy that we've at the table or that we've got a sniff of the table, now once we're there, we need to start pushing and saying what needs to be done specifically for our people. Because it's not only it's going to translate from the student, it's going to translate from the employees, it's going to translate into administration, it's going to translate into the board, and we're not represented in any of those particular areas. So you're talking about institutional, you're talking about systematic, it's all there. Now, since we have this conversation of individuals who have accomplished things in life, Now it's up to us to start voicing our angst, our challenges, and how these things are actually impacting and impeding the growth of not only us professionally, but generational growth for the individuals that we are supposed to be serving, right? So one of the things that I do in my world is, again, I call it what it is. And, one of the things that people will say that I'm in an environment, and you can see I have a full beard, 6'3", bald, and all the above. Some aspects that could be intimidating, right? But I own that space and I don't back down from that. And it's not that I'm calling it out as just trying to be bragging and stuff along those lines, but a simple fact that I have a space and I have a presence, and I'll be doing myself a disservice as well as the individuals who are watching me a disservice if I don't do what I need to do, what I'm called to do in those particular environments. So all I have to say specifically, we need to own our space, speak up on the injustice, and ensure that we're in a position to make a substantial change.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask one more question of our panelists, and we're going to move into a Q&A, and then we'll go into some takeaways and suggestions as well. To all of our panelists, I have a prompt that I want to ask you in terms of opportunities. As educators, professionals, what suggestions do you all have for anyone looking to find opportunities right now and leverage the current job market that we see, lack thereof opportunities, and what role do you think possibly earning another degree will play in that? Feel free to speak based on your experiences. So it's an open question. I just love to hear from you. Mr. Jolley, we'll start with you.
Can you rephrase the question? I just want to make sure I understand and how I can apply it to the legal community.
Not a problem, not a problem. Basically, what I'd love to hear from you is, based on your background and experience, what suggestions do you have for folks that are listening in to find opportunities right now, given the current climate, particularly for African Americans, not just Black men, but all of us?
That's a heavy question.
It is.
It is. My answer, I want to take it back to what the gentleman was saying before about knowing
Sure.
our worth. So I think that's a foundational item, knowing our worth. And even if you don't have an advanced degree, you are worthy and important to where we are going. I also want to go back to what he said about acknowledging that there is racism, there has been racism, and there will be racism. In the 60s, we saw people being hosed down and being chased by dogs, and now we're seeing people being videotaped and being killed and shot while they're taking jogs. So we've got to acknowledge it, but where we can, we've got to withstand it, and stand against it, and stand for ourselves individually and for our people. In where we also can use it to our advantage. And I think that's important, and people want to, during this time period, you're looking for an opportunity. As someone said on phone call that I was on, opportunity is all around us. Depends on our perspective and how we can see it. I think this panel is a good example of, even in spite of racism, there are 6 Black males with beards and advanced degrees and doing pretty good. So there is positive proof that we can do well, and we can look out for others. And I think that's the biggest thing. Where we can, let's help others. So if you have questions about wanting to become into one of our practice areas, whether it be science or law, we'd love to help you. I think that's the best thing I can offer, is my personal help to be a mentor to anyone, and to be reached out to. I don't know if everybody knows Joe, or if it's appropriate to give out my email, but if you email me at williamtjolley@gmail.com, I will email you back about my story of how I became an attorney and how I can help you become an attorney. I'll keep it simple. There's 3 ways, the 3 steps. First, you take the LSAT. And in my opinion, I think you should take a class, unless you're one of those geniuses that just thinks you can walk in there, or you can take your own prep course, do it alone. I don't suggest that. Me, myself, and I took a course. It costs like $1,200 to maybe $2,000. Take what you think is best for you and do that. Then go to law school. In law school, don't drop out. That's the thing. Don't let them scare you. and make it through the first year is basically what my parents were trying to tell me, because I started straight out of undergrad. And thirdly, take the bar if you want to be an attorney, unless you just want to be a JD, which is cool because law school does teach you great things and introduce you to cool people, like how I met Kenny Alce was through some friends because of law school. And it's been years of at least a decade of friendship due to that interaction. The third thing is taking the bar. And the bar, you have to take it. It's not given. So it's a mindset. And we all can do it. And we're here to help. And I think that's the best answer for me.
Thank you, Mr. Jolley. I'm actually going to move right into your colleague, your esteemed colleague, Mr. Alce. And I'd love to ask you the same question, sir.
First, great answer, Jolley, and I cannot wait for the virus to be over so we can all attend the Beards and Advanced Degree Party.
You already know.
On a different note, so right now we see there are 33 million people unemployed, which is, if you think about it, staggering. And like I began the conversation, that is a tragedy, but it's also an opportunity. So to Joe's question, I think right now the best thing a person can do, especially now when we have the entire world's information and history at our fingertips, is to find a way to distinguish yourself in your field. I was having this conversation with a friend or with a colleague a couple weeks ago. This feels different than 2008, for example, when we had our last.
Indeed.
Right? So right now, there are 33, thank you, somebody said 50 million jobs out right now, or unemployed. But that's not a byproduct of the economy contracting per se. That's something that, at least to some experts' acknowledgement, that when the virus is over, we're gonna need all those jobs back. We're gonna need to fill all those positions. And will employers go back to the employees they had? Maybe. But if whatever field or industry, or as Jolley said, practice space you want to be in, find a way right now to make best use of your time to try to enhance your skills, make yourself visible, whether it be through LinkedIn. Connecting, now's a great time to connect with people through LinkedIn. Sharpening your skills through a number of free online courses. I know Harvard is doing it. I believe Khan's Academy is always out there. Hell, I'm teaching myself economics right now. So that, I think, is a great way to try to continue to sharpen your skills so that in time, when the economy comes back, and it will, hopefully under a different president, then we'll see people be able to scoop those jobs up. And I would love it to be our people.
Thank you so much. We're going to now move over to Dr. Waters with this question.
And so pretty much what Ken was talking about in relation to being prepared. It's like the old saying, the old fable is that I could lead a man to the door, but he has to walk through it. Or I could teach a man, I give a man 50 fish, but if I don't teach him how to fish, he'll always go be hungry, and so forth, right? I know I jacked that up. But for the most part, I believe now is your time to, as we go back to some notes I talked about, to take care of yourself. And what does that mean? Take care of yourself from a physical standpoint, take care of yourself from an emotional standpoint, and take care of yourself just personally and socially. Yeah, we live in a society where social media allows us to connect with people all over the world. I mean, just the reality that we're connecting with people from all over the country right now, and we don't necessarily have that direct connection beyond just the internet. So the point I'm trying to make is that how can we be better for someone else, for some other employer, for some other person, if we're not taking care of our own self and recognizing where our strengths and weaknesses are? I would say one of the things, I'm a natural introvert. And through this COVID-19 and through this pandemic and so forth, it hasn't bothered me that much. However, I will also say that it's forced me to really look deep inside of who I am and what do I bring to society. So this time for me is more of a healing time. And I believe if you're looking for employment, you're looking to change careers. I've seen in the chat some people looking to change, looking to change their degree, matriculation, and so forth. Really do some self examining of yourself, right? Examine what works for you and what does not work for you. I look at it more times than not when we were all operating in society, we were normally chasing whatever that buzz was, whatever was the cool thing to do. But we was considered abnormal if we were those individuals who were forced to stay home, or if we stayed home and didn't want to hang out with everyone, right? Now, since we're all forced to sit in our own space, what are you going to do with that space? Are you going to pick up a new skill? Are you going to learn something new? Are you going to try that recipe that you've been thinking about? What are you going to do? Because this is going to come to a halt. And yes, the reality is that there are inequalities in relation to race in society. That's the reality. Now, this is kind of like a space where we could kind of close that gap some. It's going to still be there, but what are we going to do to make ourselves more marketable, to make ourselves more talented in the meantime? This is not by happenstance, right? I have faith. There's a reason this happened. And I'm maximizing the time. So all I have to say is that self-care, ensure that you are impacting and empowering yourself with something that is tangible by using intangible methods to improve your outcomes once it's all said and done.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith?
So I want to be very pithy here and say the first thing is get on your hustle, period. If you don't have a hustle, find a hustle. Find a trade, identify your passion, and figure out how your passion can intersect with a profession that is life-giving and soul-stirring, right? I want to just kind of push back on this notion that a college degree is the way. A college degree is a way, but it is not the only way in that respect. And I want to recognize that, I want to acknowledge that, because there are life circumstances that people face that may limit their opportunity to pursue a college degree. Financial, familial, whatever the case might be, there are certain circumstances that might limit people's access to pursue a college degree. But that should not deter an individual from continuous learning opportunities. And so whether it is maximizing the devices that you have at your fingertips to learn how to do Adobe Suite. I've been working on Adobe Suite now and Sketch, and really honing my skills in design, because I recognize that that is a skill that is so seminal to the work that I do in diversity and inclusion, insofar as how I message things. So I'm really ramping up my skill sets in those areas. And then I would just simply offer what to do is ultimately believe in yourself and in the possibility that there is a reward on the other side. Whatever the other side is, there's a greater reward for you over on the other side, and to be encouraged and to be inspired and to know that ultimately this is just a moment in time and that we will make it through.
Can I piggyback on what he said and just acknowledge? I want to just go towards what he was saying about importance of our mindset being great during this. Just keeping a positive mindset and keeping a positive outlook, despite all the things going on around us. Just remembering that, like you said, we will, whatever your goal is, whatever your other side is, keep that in the forefront of your mind. Write it down, put up pictures of it, visualize it, so that you can have a reason and train your brain to have a reason for why you want to make it through this to the other side for positive results. And keeping that positive outlook will be, and is very important for our people and everyone who wants to make it through this safely and soundly.
Thank you, Mr. Jolley. Thank you very much. Folks, we're going to try to be as quick as possible here so we can try to wrap up with the questions. We're going to move into the Q&A space now, and then we'll wrap up our webinar this evening. So a couple questions that I see in the chat space is, first question I'd love to ask, and I'll share this with those who want to chime in, so feel free to let me know, panelists. One of our attendees is asking, what are your thoughts on constitutional convention and a full reboot for the country?
I would love for it to happen, but I'm just not going to operate as if it would happen. I'm going to operate and hope just in case it doesn't happen. I mean, it would be cool, but I don't know what the chances are of that.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move over to Dr. Waters. You want to share anything here?
So the question is, if it was a constitutional reboot,
Yeah, they're hoping, they're hoping for a constitutional convention and a full reboot for the country. What are your thoughts on that comment?
And we're still waiting for our 40 acres and a mule, right? Yeah, come on, man. Just, again, let's be realistic about what it is. It is what it is. I mean, it sounds in a perfect world if that was to happen, but you also have to understand that by you rebooting a country and some actual documents that was drafted on the backs of slaves, that was drafted on the backs of segregation, racism, and we're in 2020, and all of a sudden you want to tell them at the end of the day they were wrong. Come on now. Let's just
Power doesn't concede easily.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Just so my thing is, I would love for it to happen, but I also like to operate in real time. And considering that that may not happen, I suggest that we start creating policy again, coming together as we have in this particular moment that benefits us in the long run, right? What can we do out of this? What can we take as voters? What can we take to our state representatives? What can we take to our governors that really can impact us? And because, yes, from a global standpoint, we're all impacted, but we also got to think about our communities and those particular issues that we can really have a direct connection and see some change. So.
Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to chime in here? All right, we're going to move into the questions and the discussion and the Q&A. So we have a guest that says, I'm a professional in higher education. Currently, I am an admissions counselor in at a reasonably reputable law school, excuse me. One of my responsibilities is diversity initiatives. The student body is predominantly white, like most law schools in the nation. What are some tips, advice to increase diversity and access to Black students who wish to attend law school during this pandemic? So I would love to kick those questions to Ms. Attorney Alce and to Attorney Jolley. Attorney Alce, we'll start with you, if you don't mind.
Tips to increase diversity and access for Black students who wish to attend law school. I also see your second question on things you can do to support Black law students. I'd rather tackle that one. The first, less we can do, like Jolley called out, there are steps, LSAT and so on and so forth. However, and not all is lost, in law school in particular, you as in the counseling office, you as a liaison, I think the best thing I would recommend is to do your best to connect law students, Black law students, especially with practitioners, Black practitioners. And your attendance here is great, right? So you get to meet Jolley, me, and hopefully have access to our circles and connecting Black students with people who went through. I can't tell you all the nights I sat there just a fish out of water in law school, being Black, like Jolley said, looking like I do, talking like I do, and just feeling ostracized, feeling like I didn't belong. And it's thankfully to the people who had been there, the giants on whose shoulders I stood on, that were able to help me place a lot of things in context. So, and I think that also leads back to those students who are interested in law school. Maybe, you know, each one teach one, each one reach one, to the extent you can connect law students to those who, I can't tell you, I mean, what I did to get into law school. That was years ago. But the law students are a lot more connected to the process. So connecting pre-law to law students, and then also connecting law students to practitioners all in the Black space, I think is a great job if you can get it done.
Thank you for sharing. Great advice. Thank you. I just learned something, so I appreciate you sharing that, Attorney Alce. Attorney Jolley?
Piggybacking off of what Kenny said, there are a few organizations that I would suggest for the gentleman or the lady to reach out to. One is the National Bar Association. Another is the Washington Bar Association, specifically the Young Lawyers Division, would be really helpful in providing mentors and some options to help answer that question better. Because like Kenny said, it's hard to answer that question. We do understand. Kenny went to Georgetown, I went to Howard. Different, I would say, different seas of students there, but issues that are similar, just being in the struggle and trying to make it through. We'd love to talk to you more, but I think the National Bar Association and Washington Bar Association are probably great places to be able to help answer that, specifically in helping young lawyers.
And folks, just so you know, I will, Attorney Jolley, thank you so much. Folks on the call still on webinar, I will actually share out our panelists' social media contact information, post this webinar as a part of some of the resources that we will share with the group of attendees who registered. So I just want to point that out. The next question that we have is from someone who's asking a question. Our law school doesn't have counseling, a counseling office, or a mental health professional. What are some things that I can do to support Black law students on the wellness front in my position as a non-mental health professional? So, Dr. Hopkins, I am coming your way on that question. We'd love to hear from you on this one.
I had a funny feeling I was going to be tapped for that one. Prior to working in private practice, I worked, I was a staff psychologist at Georgetown University's counseling center. And at their law school, actually, the Georgetown University Law Center, which is separate from the main campus, is one of the few law schools that has their own counseling center, right? And I wish that was the case for all law schools, because I'm sure, as Attorney Alce and Jolley can attest to, law school is incredibly stressful and incredibly competitive. And it's a challenging environment. And I know that you don't just learn the law, you become attorney, right? It's a changing process. So law students certainly need resources. So I would first see if you have some sort of, if there's a connecting university, right? Like Howard University has a law school, right? But they use the resources of the connecting university, same for Georgetown, right? Hopefully, most campuses do have a counseling center for students. So my hope is that your university is at least providing those kind of resources to all graduate students, law students as well, or at least have some sort of resources through the offices that prioritize student concerns to give to students regarding their mental health. It's well known within the legal community that practicing law is incredibly stressful, and there are often higher rates of substance abuse and depression, and law students need support, especially during law school. And so your university should have some sort of resources for the students there to send them in the proper directions where they can go. I think also encouraging people, right? Mindfulness is a really popular thing that people are learning about more and more, and encouraging people to turn to things like the Calm app or other mindfulness apps that get us to be present with ourselves in the moment. And then, of course, always encouraging people to consider therapy as an option, right? You don't need something terribly wrong. And I would say if you're a person of color pursuing higher education, that's more than reason enough, knowing all the stress and challenges that you're going to that come along with that journey, to make sure you're in a place where you can process your experience, make meaning of it, and address issues as they arise in real time. So that's where my mind goes. Lastly, I'll mention is that because of the current situation, a lot of insurance companies are doing away with their deductibles and copays. So if you are someone who's always wanted to try therapy, it's a good time to give your insurance company a call, see whether they are one of those companies that are doing away with those fees, and start looking into beginning that process.
And if I could add to your remarks, Justin, also a service that often goes underutilized in organizations are EAP, which provides counseling opportunities for employees as well, along with other services that can be very helpful in working through any life circumstance that might have you feeling a bit melancholy or depressed. So check out, go to your HR, go to your benefits team, seek out those options because they are readily available for you.
And for students who might not have that on their campus, because you're in school, I believe it's true that you're supposed to have health insurance through the school, and you should be able to call around through that health insurer to see who might be able to service you, even if it's off campus or not through your school.
Thank you all for just sharing those great resources. This is going to be our last Q&A question, folks, for the sake of time, so we can wrap up. After this, we'll have some quick takeaways for you all, and I will hopefully be able to get this video out to you all as soon as possible. So thank you all for your participation again. Last question we have in the Q&A. One of our guests says that they are a natural introvert as well. Life before COVID-19 was too fast for them, and this mode feels more comfortable, if only a bit too slow and simple. Regardless, inequality exists either way. We're talking about gaining skills while we have all this extra time at home. How do equity dynamics come into play here? What do we need to consider to make sure everyone has the opportunity to pursue growth while at home? That's a great question. I'm going to ask, for the sake of time, either Dr. Waters or Mr. Smith field this question, if you don't mind.
I'll be brief.
Whoever wants.
I was just typing in their response, and access. That's one of the things that, again, we need to kind of bridge these gaps between unequitable type of systems. And one of the things I do is I submit to like different type of news digest systems, whether it's peer review articles. They're pretty free. Like submit to like the Atlantic, submit to the Higher Ed Journal. And what's interesting about them is that they provide you with information that's pretty much tailored to your needs. And within that, they also provide information that you probably never thought of. So you don't know what you don't know. And one of the things that the old saying, again, I'm going back to old saying, is that if you want to hide something from someone, put it in a book. And one of the things that I do on a consistent basis every morning, I submit to this online database that sends me a bunch of information from stock markets, information. It's called the Brew, right? And I submit and I pretty much things that I want to read about and things that may be of interest to me. And what it does, it educates me. And what I find is that I may not know everything about something, but at least I know something about everything. And that's one of the things I believe will empower you, because it should spark it should spark something inside of you to say, hey, if I want to learn more about the stock market, now it gives you information how to start becoming a trader. If I want to learn more about building cars or whatever it may be, if I want to learn something about whatever it may be, again, you have to be out there empowering yourself and searching for the information. And there's information out there. You just have to be diligent about looking for that type of stuff.
Dr. Waters, thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. Folks, what we're going to do now is we're going to wrap up, and we have just a few more questions that I'd love to ask. I want to switch back over to Dr. Hopkins really quick, because I think it's important for folks to hear. Just Dr. Hopkins, really quick, for some just takeaways and final questions. What resources are out there for folks that you recommend right now that are participating in, as we look to all navigate through where we are in this current climate in regards to COVID-19 and the effects of the job market, access to healthcare, mental health needs as a whole, education? But from your space, what are some resources that you think, if you could give me 3 resources, what would you tell folks that they should do right now if they're looking for support?
Well, I'll share. I guess it would be 2.
Okay.
We've talked about a number of different things, right? In terms of financial access, employment access. Like we've talked about a number of things that people can do and look into as far as support in those ways. But something that Dr. Waters is really resonating with me, and you had shared some parables a few minutes ago. So in the spirit of that, like what keeps coming to my mind is this joke that I always hear about psychologists, and that's, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? 1, but the light bulb really has to want to change. Right. And I think that, I think that this is a time right now, right, where there's, a lot that's going on in our world that may hopefully impact some change, but regardless of what happens on the outside, we have the agency within us to manage the current moment, not the one that's coming in a few minutes, not the one that's coming 10 minutes, 10 hours, the next day. We don't have the answers for what lies next month, let alone the months beyond that. But we do have some say over what's happening right now here in our present. There are things that we can control. There's so many things that are outside of our control, but there are things right now in the here and now that we can control and that we can turn our attention to, right? There are people that are discovering new ways to relax and enjoy themselves. There are people right now that are just surviving because that's all they can muster. Maybe they're working from home, and maybe work has beefed up even more, right? And maybe they're dealing with even more stress, and really they're just surviving. And that's an accomplishment in itself when you're in the midst of a global pandemic, right? So there are some people that are going to be in a position where they don't necessarily need to build a new portfolio of skills, but really just surviving and getting through the moment is going to be enough for them. And that's okay. And then there are going to be other people where it's, they're in a situation where innovation and the will to change and resilience are going to be your saving grace. And can you be in a place where you can tap into that, take stock of what's happening, own it, name it, call it for what it is, feel your way through that, but also be in the present where you can focus in on what it is you can dictate, right? And I think that's incredibly important.
Thank you for sharing that great insight. Dr. Hopkins, I think you are leading us into our last question for the evening. Again, folks, thank you for staying on board. Really, really appreciate your support and participation. I would love to just start with Attorney Alce, and then we'll go to Mr. Attorney Jolley, Dr. Waters, and then Mr. Smith in that order. Just what key takeaway would you like for those participating on this call in terms of how we should continue to try to navigate through this current climate as African Americans? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, Dr. Hopkins, thank you for sharing. This piggybacks right into the last question, so really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Folks?
So first, Joe, kudos to you for bringing this panel together, for the great question and for moderating it in such an excellent way. This is Black excellence, so thank you. My one takeaway.
Thank you, my brother. Much appreciated.
My one takeaway is strike when the iron's hot. This is a time that there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of bad, but within that bad, there's opportunity. So find your opportunity and go ahead and strike.
Thank you for sharing that. Attorney Jolley?
I would say, going back to my original item, safety by any means necessary, as Malcolm X said, is super important. My parents just got tasers, so I encourage everybody to be protected, just in case.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll go with Dr. Waters.
I say be faithful, be prepared, and take care of yourself. Faithful, be prepared, and take care of yourself. That's just pretty much what I'm doing right now.
All right. Thank you, Doc. Mr. Smith?
You know, I would say love. Self-love, communal love is really important. I'm reminded of a remark that a friend imparted upon me, a saying that a friend imparted upon me a while ago about love. And he says that, you know, love is intentional. You don't fall into it. You have to leap into it. And so be intentional about your love. Be intentional about loving self and loving others as well.
Thank you. We had one more question that came offline, and I don't want to not acknowledge that person, and then I will wrap things up. One person asked, you know, they have a D1 athlete at home who's very worried about returning back to campus. Big university is looking to return to sports, and the majority of athletes are Black. Dr. Hopkins, how can I support my son and his sports and his sport as he considers returning to campus? This hasn't happened, but wondering about students and scholarships if they choose not to return. So.
Right, and I'll be really, really brief. I did see that question. I'm in the process of typing an answer, and I'm working with a couple of athletes in my practice who are concerned about this as well, going back to school and whether they'll be able to get back to work. Right? They may not. Right? There's a lot of our collective experiences, milestone experiences that are being stripped away and stolen from us. And I think it's okay and appropriate to mourn that. You know, your son may want to, if it happens so that athletics don't pick back up, your son may want to decide whether he wants to return to campus or not to kind of retain his eligibility years. And so that could be a conversation point. But in the meantime, what is he going to be doing to continue to be a better athlete, right? He's not going to be on the field. He's not going to be on the court. He's not going to be playing the sport. Can he be training? Can he be continuing to better himself? The work can still continue, even if the gamesmanship and the sportsmanship is put on hold.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Hopkins. To that parent, I will just add with you on this, just from my own background experience in this space, going from high school to college and then transitioning and supporting pro athletes. I would tell you, be patient with the process. The universities are keeping that in mind. As Dr. Hopkins said, that eligibility piece is important. And I think it's also going to be important should your son look to transition beyond college to the professional level, starting to open up his build relationships, as Dr. Waters talked about right now, you know, being productive in his time. So you can't reach out to those folks until you declare to be a professional athlete. But what you can do is start to continue to train and have his body ready mentally and make sure that he is prepared to make those transitions as they come about. So that's my piece of advice for him, but I would definitely say to stay focused on the books. And I would say if he does aspire to do anything beyond his bachelor's degree, to use this time to see what he can do to maximize that effort. So if he wants to take some more coursework, if there's something he can do online to get more classes taken care of now, so when they do come back to season, he doesn't have that load. He can take maybe 14 hours as opposed to 18 and plus hours he may need should they try to speed up things and he decides to declare for the draft the following season. So I hope that helps. Folks, thank you all so much. To the panelists, thank you, gentlemen, so much for your heart, your brotherly love, as Mr. Smith echoed earlier. Spoke to. I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you, Dr. Waters, Brother Alce, Mr. Jolley. Always a lot of love, and Dr. Hopkins. Thank you so much to all of the guests that attended this evening. We hope to see you back in the near future. We will definitely send out another announcement when we're able to come back together. Continue to stay safe. Continue to love yourselves. Care for those and your loved ones around you, and make sure that you all are just being intentional, as Mr. Smith said, about that time together. And as Dr. Waters said, you know, just being productive and being at peace. I think he's absolutely right. This is a time when you can actually reflect and really get healthy, both mentally, spiritually, and physically. I say all three. So again, thank you all for your support. We hope to be in touch with you soon. We will share out those resources with you. Gentlemen, thank you so much again for being here. It was great, and look forward to working with you again in the future.
Good night.
Bless.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Nice.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.